Good morning, everybody. I'm Muriel Bowser, the Mayor of Washington, D.C. I am joined by members of our public safety team. We are here today in beautiful Columbia Heights to kick off the 2021 Fall Crime Prevention Initiative. We know that we are experiencing an unacceptable level of gun violence. And while this is a part of a disturbing trend nationwide, we know that we will and can do more at the local level to get illegal guns off our streets and to hold people accountable when they bring violence into our neighborhoods. So we know that there is no place in the city where this violence is acceptable. And unfortunately, we know from the statistics that there are neighborhoods that deal with a disproportionate amount of violence. And with the Fall Crime Prevention Initiative, we will target 5 of those neighborhoods. One here right in Columbia Heights, Brightwood in Ward 4, Benning in Ward 7, historic Anacostia and Washington Highlands, Bellevue neighborhoods in Ward 8. And so during the Fall Crime Prevention Initiative, the focus of MPD will be on addressing gun violence. Neighbors in those target areas will likely notice increased MPD presence. However, most of MPD's engagement will be with those who've been identified as highly at risk of becoming involved in gun violence. So we know from past experiences that these targeted initiatives help us drive down crime. So I want to give you some examples from this past summer. In our targeted areas, we saw a 33% decrease in homicides, a 45% decrease in robberies, a 20% decrease in violent crime, and a 12% decrease in overall crime. Additionally, law enforcement was able to recover 70 illegal firearms in those areas. And so now we bring those additional resources to these 5 areas as well. And I'll just finish by saying this. We know that the last 18 months has been incredibly disruptive and difficult. We've lived through the health impacts and the economic impacts of the pandemic. And different people across our city have experienced the pandemic at different levels. So we know that the stress and anxiety related to the pandemic also has an impact on our safety. So while we're talking about our law enforcement initiatives today, know that we have vast resources available to help people deal with the stress that they've experienced from the pandemic and the trauma that people are experiencing because of loss and, unfortunately, violence in their communities. So I am also very focused on all aspects of our city being open. First and foremost, our city government, and I'm grateful to DC government employees. Give them a big round of applause. Been showing up every day of this pandemic in our offices in person since July 11th as well. Opening in-person services that relate to public safety as well. So we're grateful to them, and we're certainly looking forward to all parts of our public safety ecosystem being open and in person. Today is also October 1st, which is the new year for DC government. And the good thing about the new year for DC government is a lot of the enhanced funding that we've been able to put in place, some having to do with the American Rescue Plan, goes into effect today. Aspects of our violence prevention efforts have been significantly enhanced that will allow us to hire more individuals, put more people in housing and in job training, and address the root causes of violence. So let me be clear, we're coming to this problem from all angles. I believe in throwing everything that we have at the violence problem so that we can help more residents and keep more neighborhoods safe. But one thing remains clear. We will not tolerate people using guns in our city. So if you insist on terrorizing neighborhoods and each other with guns and displaying a disregard for human life, you will be held accountable. So now I'm going to ask the Chief of Police to come forward, but before I do that, I want to also acknowledge a number of folks who are here, and the Chief will acknowledge the captains who are going to work in these special Fall Crime Initiative areas. First and foremost, let me give a big thank you to the Chief of Police, Robert Conti. Give him a round of applause. Sean Benedict, the Assistant Executive Chief for Police, Stuart Immerman, Assistant Chief, Han Kim, Commander, Dr. Barbara Bazron, who is the Director of the District's Department of Behavioral Services, Linda Harley Harper, the Director of the city's Gun Violence Prevention Office, Chris Geldhart, the Deputy Mayor for Public Safety and Justice, and Del McFadden, the Director of the Office of Neighborhood Safety and Engagement. So with that, Chief Conti.
Thank you, Mayor Bowser. Good morning, and thank you all for joining us. Today, to kick off our Fall Crime Prevention Initiative, I am Robert J. Conti III, Chief of Police of the Metropolitan Police Department. I want to start by thanking Mayor Bowser. Let's give her a round of applause. And I'll tell you why in a second. This mayor is not a mayor who observes public safety from the sideline. She is actively engaged daily with me on public safety matters that happen in the community, that happen in the District of Columbia. And I can tell you, as I talk to chiefs of police all around the country, that does not happen everywhere. So our mayor is engaged, and she is focused on the business of public safety and keeping the residents of the District of Columbia safe. So I want to thank her for that, and all of our D.C. government agency partners and every member of the Metropolitan Police Department for once again coming together to combat violent crime in order to build safer, stronger neighborhoods. On August 31st, we concluded our 2021 Summer Crime Prevention Initiative in the District of Columbia. Year after year, we come to the same conclusion that strategic crime prevention and focused enforcement works, and that crime prevention initiatives are successful in reducing violent crime. When analyzing the Summer Crime Prevention Initiative results over the years, we've seen violent crime reductions ranging from nearly 15% to more than 35%. This past summer, as the mayor indicated, the Summer Crime Prevention Initiative areas saw violent crime decrease by 20%. That includes a reduction in homicides by 33% and robberies by 45%. Further, we safely recovered 73 illegal firearms within the target areas. The results of these efforts have been outstanding. And this is exactly the type of excellence I want our department to continue to transfer into the upcoming season. Today, I am introducing you all to our plans for this year's Fall Crime Prevention Initiative, which begins today and will run until December the 18th. We've identified 5 focus areas that have been identified through data analysis and criminal intelligence. An MPD captain is designated to each of these areas and will develop and implement specific strategies to address the needs of each area. They will also manage resource deployment, facilitate community engagement and outreach activities, and work closely with our partners. We reviewed the crime statistics and met with MPD stakeholders to identify the following 2020 Fall Crime Prevention Initiative areas. Columbia Heights in the 3rd District will be led by Captain Francis Jenkins. Let's give him a round of applause. Brightwood Park in the 4th District will be led by Captain Franklin Porter. The Benning Road Corridor in the 6th District will be led by Captain Matthew Fitzgerald. He's newly promoted as of today. Historic Anacostia in the 7th District will be led by Captain Nikki Lavenhouse. And lastly, Washington Highlands Bellevue in the 7th District will be led by Captain Joseph Kuchta. We will be laser focused on providing these areas with all available resources and utilizing evidence-based and intelligence-driven strategies to combat crime, while partnering with other law enforcement agencies, community organizations, and advocates with a collective goal to reduce crime. Our number one goal during the Fall Crime Prevention Initiative is to reduce violent crime. That's the number one goal. Provide a feeling of safety and security for the community, develop relationships within these communities and with our partner agencies, and improve the quality of life within each community. Together, we can accomplish these goals by continuing to focus patrol assets and resources in these areas while supplementing this deployment with specialized units, including MPD's Crime Suppression Team, Special Operations Division, and Community Outreach Teams, using an intelligence-led policing approach, dedicating investigative resources proactively, as well as in the investigation of reported crime, focusing our resources on repeat violent offenders through technology and tailored enforcement approaches, coordinating heavily with other DC government agencies for the delivery of services needed within neighborhoods. This includes comprehensive community outreach and engagement, particularly with the city's youth and families. And finally, collaborating with federal law enforcement partners to enhance investigative efforts to disrupt criminal activity within the Fall Crime Prevention Initiative areas. Additionally, we have designated community outreach teams in each of our 7 police districts. Their roles are to arrange all of our community outreach events and efforts. We want to engage our city every day and ensure that our department has a positive community impact. Today, we are joined by our 3rd District Community Outreach Team, Ms. Jacqueline Bethea, Officer Michael Cahoon, and Officer Andy Pham. I have witnessed firsthand these members going above and beyond to bring resources and engagement to the 3rd District community already, and I look forward to all of our district's teams doing the same for the District of Columbia. We can now take any questions that you may have. Yes. 1 second. I can't hear you, Shannon. Hold on 1 second. Just give it 1 second. Okay, there you go. Jack, there you go. I'm sorry. Yeah, go ahead.
Can you break down, you said there's been a reduction in homicides, but DC police data shows that homicides went up this year 9%?
So we're talking about specifically in the summer crime initiative areas, in the areas that we identified as summer crime initiative areas for the period beginning in May 1 through the summer months. So while we are showing an increase in overall homicides for the District of Columbia, we're specifically talking about in the areas that we identified as the summer crime initiative areas. And, you know, part of what the mayor mentioned and what I'm mentioning is what we know is that this effort, it works. When we dedicate the resources, we are able to focus in on specific areas. What we have seen year after year, this is not our first year doing these crime prevention initiatives. We see decreases in crime, and we want to do that in these communities.
And I have a question for the mayor about DC Council introducing emergency legislation to increase access to virtual learning and also to use some of those attendance rules. Are you in support of that legislation?
Okay, can you repeat the question? Let's
Hello.
All right, there we go. And can you introduce yourself?
Test.
I got another one for you.
Never mind. Go ahead. Stand up, please. And then I'll repeat your question. I was waiting because people at home like to hear the questions too.
DC Council is introducing legislation to increase access to virtual learning and also to keep some of those tough attendance rules. Are you in support of that legislation?
I absolutely am not in support of any legislation that's going to disrupt in-person learning.
There are parents who are complaining that child services are being called on their
And there are parents who are thrilled that their children are in school learning in person. And our responsibility as the government is to set up a system that is going to allow children to be able to get what they have been missing for a year and a half. And that's access to buildings that are set up for learning, to adults who are teaching them well, to their colleagues and extracurricular activities that are not only enhancing their learning, but also making it possible for them to participate in all of the programs and services that we've invested in. I actually haven't seen any legislation, and I would strongly encourage the council members to allow the people responsible for education to do their jobs. We have certainly invested for more than a year and a half in making sure that our buildings are safe, and we feel very confident that school buildings are the safest place for our kids. Our kids are not being cloistered in the house, okay? They're not. They are going to friends' house, they're going to birthday parties, they're going to restaurants, they're going on vacation. They're doing all of those things. So it's also possible for them to go into school buildings that have been invested in with protocols that have been proven to be effective. We also need to look back at our whole experience with schools during the pandemic, which goes back to February. What we don't want to do is tell parents that they're going to get a virtual experience that replaces in-person learning, because we know it doesn't. Yes.
I have two questions. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I have two questions for Chief Conte.
Okay.
My first question is, what criteria did you use to select the captains for this fall crime prevention initiative? And second of all, has your department undergone a study in terms of why the homicide rate is spiking the way it is? I understand that this is a nationwide trend, but has the department done a study in terms of why these homicides are the way they are?
Thank you for that question. So the first, in response to your first question, how we selected these individuals, many of the captains, to include the one who just got promoted today, these captains, they have responsibility for those communities. These are captains, and one of the things I wanted to do this year, I wanted to have captains who are actually invested in that community, not like captains we bring in from someplace else. They stay for 2 or 3 months, and then they go back to the places where they come from. These captains are captains who are assigned to the patrol districts. They have responsibility for those areas. I want them to get in there to make sure that they know the members of the community. The police officers who work in those areas, they work for these captains. So it's important that we make sure that we build on the relationships that we already have, and we're not just moving people in and moving people out for the purposes of the initiative. So that's the first thing. The second response to your question about the study, no official sanctioned study has been done. I can tell you, I look at every homicide that happens in the District of Columbia. Again, I talk with my colleagues all around the country, and I don't think you're going to find any entity that will point to a single issue to say, hey, this is it. The common theme across the country, guns, that's a common theme. The other common theme is accountability or lack thereof. That's a common theme. People who are just in a bad place in terms of how they engage with each other and so quick to go to a gun. And then the other thing that oftentimes will come up is just like this, I don't know, it's this love fest with guns. Sometimes what we're seeing in community, as popular as a Jordan tennis shoe is, you have firearms that are that popular, and people want to get at these new firearms for whatever reason, and that's how simple disputes over, $5, $20, simple disputes are being resolved with the use of a firearm. So we're seeing a lot of that, and that's across the country. All those things really kind of meshed all together. COVID, all of those things in a big pot. I think there was a study done recently in one of the universities, maybe out in Nebraska, somewhere, where they were talking about this issue. I mean, it's all these things. I wish it was just one thing. We can all just focus on that one thing, but there's so many things that go into the dynamics of the uptick in violence that we see.
This one's working.
Okay, I got you now, Paul.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah,
Okay.
I got you.
Chief Conte, you've said previously that you'd never seen so many guns in the city.
That's true.
You're taking a lot of guns off the street.
Yep.
However, there's anecdotal evidence that when your officers pull over a car and in the car you find weapons, you make arrests, yet the U.S. Attorney's Office is not papering those cases. Anecdotally, it appears that they're not papering a case unless you can put a gun in the hands of somebody. How is that affecting your policing in this city, and do you think the U.S. Attorney's Office needs to do more? And I have a follow-up question for the mayor.
All right, so there is some truth to that, Paul. It is very difficult. The environment has become more difficult in terms of how we are able to make cases. To your point, a firearm in the car, there are 4 individuals in the car, okay, who's going to jail behind this firearm? If we select this person, all 4 individuals end up going. What ends up happening, and what the U.S. Attorney oftentimes, what they would like to do is for us to get some type of DNA match back on that, but that arrest comes 4 or 5 months down the line, and what happens, that person oftentimes is operating out in community, oftentimes picking up another gun, over the course of that time. So that's very frustrating. But, to that end, what I know is that when we take that gun out of the car, that gun, those bullets, they don't kill anybody. I know that much. What I know is that the over 1,500 firearms that we've recovered, illegal firearms that we've recovered so far in the city so far this year, those firearms, they're not killing anybody. Those bullets aren't killing anybody. So, if we can get the gun off of the street, for right now, I'll take that while we work on the larger systemic issue or the systematic issue. I'll take that. We get the illegal gun off the street, but I want to ultimately see people going to jail being held accountable when they violate community and go out here and use these illegal firearms illegally in our city.
And a follow-up for the mayor. You have a new U.S. attorney coming in a couple of weeks. Have you met with this new U.S. attorney, and are you going to continue to try and get some of these gun cases into federal court under this new U.S. attorney? And where does that stand as far as the agreement you had with Jesse Liu?
Well, we will. We have had a transition, and I look forward to meeting the new U.S. attorney when confirmed. And I understand that process is moving. I think that's a good thing, to have some certainty in the office, to have major roles filled, and we look forward to working in collaboration with them. I don't have anything else to say about that until we have an updated discussion on the case. On the cases going to district court. I think what's also important that's different this time than when we talked about those cases with Attorney Jesse Liu was how active the different courts are. The Superior Court and the Federal Court, if they are moving cases as quickly. I think when we first talked about it, they were about the same. I'm not sure if that's the case now.
Peter?
This is actually for the mayor.
Okay.
One of the neighborhoods in the Fall Crime Prevention Initiative is Brightwood Park, where they've had in that area 5 homicides this year, including 3 killed in one incident. The council member for that area has been trying to get Kennedy Street corridor included in the building blocks program. Is that possible? Is that under consideration at all, or does it not meet the criteria?
It does not meet the criteria for building blocks, and thank you for that question, because it's given me the opportunity to make real clear that our building blocks initiative, we're going to focus on about 150 blocks when it's fully built out, and these are long-term strategies. These aren't short-term strategies, and I'm not. The chief can address his assessment of what's happening in the Kennedy Street corridor. But I'm just going to give you my kind of man or woman on the street assessment, having dealt with it a long time, is that there are long-term strategies that need to happen on Kennedy Street, but there's some short-term acute problems that have to be addressed too. And that's what we're talking about today. Making sure that people have demonstrated in a very brazen shooting. You talk about 5 homicides. The 3 where 5 people were shot was brazen crime. Okay? And we need to deal with the people who would sneak up on their neighbors and shoot them in cold blood on the street. Okay, we need to deal with that. That's not to say that we don't have a lot of long-term resources on Kennedy Street, but we certainly do.
So, Peter, just to build on what the mayor just said, the acute part is what I'm aiming to deal with as we have outlined Brightwood Park, Kennedy Street, specifically that area, as one of the areas for our fall crime prevention initiative. As the mayor mentioned, some of these issues are very acute. Hey, look, all the programs and everything, I mean, that's great, but people can't take advantage of those programs if they don't feel safe in community. And it's my intention to make sure that residents in that community, that they feel safe, and that we do everything that we can possibly do as the Metropolitan Police Department to bring about that for the residents there in that area. Now, I think the other parts of our ecosystem, you know, as you mentioned, or one of the other, I think it was Paul mentioned, what happens with the gun cases. We recovered, before we rolled this out, we recovered a lot of guns up there in that Kennedy Street corridor. So the question then comes down to accountability. How are we holding these individuals accountable once the Metropolitan Police Department takes them into custody? Question here, and then Sam.
Chief, if I could follow up to your comment about firearms in the district.
Yes.
Talking about legally owned firearms, what's your response to police giving us information, your office giving us the information that so far this year, over 2,500 people have been granted their concealed carry permit, and firearms instructors are telling us this is because people are responding to the rise in homicides in the district, concerned for their own safety and wanting to protect themselves?
Well, I think it's probably a mixed bag there. I mean, the number is actually closer to about 8,000 concealed carry permits that we've issued over the course of time that we've been issuing, maybe 2,000 or so. But I think, you know, people have a right to own a firearm legally, you know, and those are not the firearms that are showing up on crime scenes. The firearms I'm concerned about are the ones that are in the hands of the wrong people, that take innocent lives, that take the lives of people who should not be dead or paralyzed. Those are the firearms that I'm primarily concerned about. The lawful users, the lawful carriers, you know, they have a permitting process for that. There's a whole vetting process that they go through. They get training for those firearms. Those are not the firearms that are a primary concern. It's the illegal ones that I'm primarily concerned about. Sam?
Let me just jump in.
Mayor.
I'm still concerned about them. I'm concerned about how safely they're being stored. I don't want to see any more stories about children accidentally shooting their cousins or friends. I'm concerned about people using them if they are not mentally stable and may hurt themselves. So yes, people have access and can avail themselves of all the legal ways to own guns, but we also want them to own and store them responsibly.
Thank you, Mayor.
All right, hold on. This young lady has a question. She's been waiting patiently. Please introduce yourself.
Thank you. I'm Jenny Gathright from WAMU and DCS.
Mm-hmm.
My first question I think could be answered by several people.
Okay.
But basically, you mentioned that the Fall Crime Prevention Initiative is going to be focusing on people at high risk for being involved in violence. What is the relationship between NPD's outreach to those folks and outreach from Building Blocks DC, OAG, or the One's office? Is that happening in concert? Is that happening separately?
Sure. There is overlap, as you might imagine, in the responsibility of all of those areas. The enforcement part, of course, MPD will lead. Several of the areas mentioned, probably all of them, also have been assigned some type of ones or cure the violence or building blocks attention as well. Go ahead.
The second question is for you, Mayor Bowser. Do you support Mendelson's bill to require the vaccine for council members and their staff?
We have, I think the council should at least do as much as everybody else in DC government is doing. And I'm not sure what their proposal is. Is that their proposal?
Yeah.
Yeah, I would support that. Yes. Oh, I'm sorry, Sam. You were right. You were patient.
I was patient. I've seen many of these crime initiatives, and every year we hear that in the targeted areas, the crime is down significantly. So I was just interested to hear what are some of the things you do in the targeted areas that you don't do in the non-targeted areas, and are you just moving crime around?
So, thank you. Fair question, Sam. So, in the targeted areas, the difference is that this initiative it's labor intensive, right? It's resource intensive in terms of personnel. And if we had, enough, I don't think we have enough police officers to put on, every block within community. But what we try to do through analysis is identify what are those areas that are most likely to see, repeat gunshots, homicides, robberies, etc., and focus in on those areas. Now, understanding that, we're not so focused on those areas that we forget about the areas that surround our target areas. So we will continue to focus on those areas with the district resources. It's just that there's a more intense focus there. There's overlap, as the mayor mentioned, with, building blocks or the one's office or some of our DBH, some of our other partners. We can be more intense and more in focus in those areas. And these captains, what we want them to be able to do is, hey, look, if there's an issue that needs to be resolved, like right away in one of these focus areas, we want these guys to really have priority access to be able to get the attention to those areas, because we know it's concentrated violence there that really kind of impacts what's happening in that community overall.
The criminal class takes this into consideration, that these are focused areas?
Well, sometimes they do, and you kind of see that in your deployment, right? I mean, individuals will move around, right? You see the police officers on this corner, the individuals move over there. Well, we have to be flexible enough in our deployment that we need to go to where the criminal element is, where they are making areas unsafe for communities. So a couple of months ago, you may remember, we kind of shifted our focus from being shifted more towards hotspot policing as opposed to like fixed post policing. So in other words, having officers be responsible for an area, being able to get out of the car, walk that area that they have responsibility for, understanding what the Fall Crime Prevention Initiative area is, but they have responsibility for an area. And again, the goal is to make residents safe, to make sure we reduce violent crime, and the focus in on those key individuals who are making those communities unsafe through service providers that potentially might be able to offer some help, or where there's an acute issue, MPD doing their job to do enforcement efforts.
I'm also curious that you have a fall crime initiative. We've always heard of the summer crime initiative, and somebody told me you did it in 2019. I don't remember. I did. That. But what's the idea behind doing it in the fall as well?
Well, I think the chief has already addressed that, and unfortunately, I think, well, Chief, you would address kind of the seasonal nature of some of the crimes that we see pop up in the fall, but that's also a concern for us, is this fall into winter time in terms of increases in violence. So getting ahead of it is important. I'll go 1 and 2. Yes.
Janae Dill with Axios. Mayor, could you talk about the violence interrupters? Is that program, how does that fit in, and how do you gauge that program's effectiveness now? It's been a few years of that program in D.C. How do you gauge its effectiveness?
Well, we are joined by the director of the Office of Neighborhood Safety and Engagement. We have grown this program over the course of several years. It's 4 years now? 4 years, almost 4 years of being in service. We are making a huge infusion of resources into the program. As I mentioned earlier, we were able to do that. Some American Rescue Plan dollars, other local dollars. We have been very pleased with our Pathways program and getting individuals who really need intense services into those programs. We want to build on that. And we are also looking at all of our violence prevention programs across the city and across the government. So the Office of Neighborhood Safety, as well as Cure Violence with the Attorney General, to make sure we're making effective use of those dollars. Yes, go ahead.
Can we point to, incidents reduced or, spats that were resolved or things of that nature from the program?
I think we could do a better job of making our metrics clear. And the teams, of course, each and every day, and working with individuals is less clear about how our interaction prevented somebody from using a gun. But it is important that we can tell the story of how violence intervention is effective, and that's an evolving process. Yes.
Going back to the firearms question for those trying to get the concealed carry permit,
Yeah.
Chief, your response to those who are complaining that it's taking too long to get their permit legally in the district, and then separately, how is the city now addressing the court ruling that came out recently that says that 6 people were wrongfully arrested for firearm carry in the district, and that could potentially impact 4,500 people between 2012 and 2014?
So not totally familiar with the court ruling that you just mentioned. I mean, I'm sure our legal teams are probably dissecting that and what impact that might have, if any. The other part to that, I mean, if there are individuals who are experiencing delays, I know that there was some delays maybe a couple of months ago. We have redistributed some personnel down to the firearms office, and that problem, as of lately, at least that I'm aware of, that it has been significantly reduced to within the time frame that we're allowed to process the people who are making application to carry firearms. So if there's a specific issue, that we can point to, then please, by all means, share that with me. We've been pretty good about getting those issues resolved as soon as they come to my attention.
Okay. Thank you, everybody. Thank you.